Happy holiday and a Hollyweird New Year to all of you Hollyweirdos out there. We hope that you had a weird Christmas and New Year, because let's be honest, it was pretty weird. But we hope that 2023 is filled with abundance, new beginnings, and of course, new yet weird adventures. Speaking of weird adventures, 2023 is going to be filled with quite a few of them for me and Bryce, because we have quite a few investigations prepared for the next couple of months, especially with our friends over at LA Not So Confidential, Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh. So you're going to have to stay tuned to learn more about that within later episodes. Also, we are preparing a two-parter. Yes, Bryce was a part of a paranormal investigation recently at a little theater here in downtown Los Angeles called the East West Players Theater in Little Tokyo. And this place is almost 100 years old. It's going to be celebrating its 100th birthday in March. And it is filled with theatrical film and local history. And that history tends to come alive within its walls, which may have also did just that towards the end of our interview with the production director of the theater. Something happened towards the end of that interview that left all of us a little shook, scratching our heads, that was unexplainable. So you're going to have to wait for that two-parter towards the end of February, early March. We'll be releasing it. Okay, now speaking about episodes, we're going to be releasing this episode of our interview with Real Hauntings Podcast, and we had recorded this interview with them a couple weeks ago with one of their hosts, Noah. They're such a great and wonderful podcast to follow and listen to. So follow them at Real Podcasts on Instagram. And of course, wherever you get your podcast fix. So without further ado, let's get Hollyweird with a Real Hauntings Podcast.
What's up, everyone? It's Noah Daniels, and we're here for a special episode of the Real Hauntings Podcast. This is a joint episode with the Hollyweird Paranormal Podcast. I know you're probably familiar with their podcast, as they are pretty popular. They bring you lots of fun, paranormal, spooky stories from movie sets in Hollywood and much other great paranormal goodness. I wanted to welcome Tammy and Bryce to the podcast.
Oh,
hello.
Thank you.
And as I told them before we started, I am a little under the weather, so I don't know how much the audience hears that, but I know I'm editing. I'll just hear my nasally voice all the way through, so apologize to everybody. But yeah, guys, I'm so glad you could come on. I know we've been talking for a little bit about doing some kind of collaboration. So one thing we love to find out is where our guests fall on what we call the Believo-meter. 0 meaning ghosts are not real, and 10 ghosts are absolutely real. Tammy, where do you fall on that scale?
I believe ghosts are real. We just have to know what they truly are.
Okay. And Bryce, what about you?
You have asked a loaded question. I would say that I do believe that they are real. I've seen a ghost. I've seen several things that I could not explain, including a person who I personally knew who had died. And then days later, I was seeing that person. So I do believe in ghosts. I think that ghosts get attributed, or like the nomenclature gets attributed for a lot more than maybe what could otherwise be explained as like energy or electricity. Or so I would say I'm a bit of a skeptic, but I do definitely believe in ghosts.
Yeah, that's kind of a lot of times Kat and JJ, they're my other mainstay co-host. And when we all started this, we were all skeptics who wanted to believe. That was kind of like our niche into the field. And now we've been doing this for, I guess, about 3 years. And over time, for us on that Believo-meter, some of us were like at a 0. Kat and I were a little bit higher. And over time, we've all just gone up to where like the most hardcore one of us, JJ, is probably around a 5 or 6 now.
Oh,
and
wow.
In the beginning, I mean, he was an absolute 0. He was like, there's no way ghosts are real. And then I probably sit around an 8 or a 9, and Kat kind of floats between a 6 and an 8. But, you know, like you said, I think there are a lot of things that can be attributed to what people want to believe is the paranormal. One, because it's kind of fun, and two, there's just things that we can't explain. But then there are the things that you not only hear, but you see with your own eyes that I don't know how else to explain it to myself. And I think it is kind of a scary proposition to just admit wholeheartedly, like, hey, ghosts are real. Because once you kind of open that Pandora's box of like spirits are real, it's like, where does that kind of stop?
Yeah.
At least for me, that's kind of the hardest part.
Well, and I was raised very religiously. And so the language that we had to talk about spirituality and the afterlife and what was and wasn't talked about was very binary. So there was very, like, there's a verse, not to get super biblical, but there's a verse that says, like, to be absent from the body is to be present from the Lord. And that was used to really box in any questioning about what happened to us after we die. So that growing up, you know, there was no room to question, like, okay, I can't explain this thing. Well, then it must be an angel or a demon. Like, there's no other, like, options in that world, at least the way I was raised. So a lot of it too has been me kind of deconstructing and unlearning those, like, you have to label something, it has to be like this specific thing. Like, we might not get an answer. Tammy and I have been on many adventures together where we just kind of scratch our heads and we're like, I don't know what that was. That was weird. Like that.
Yeah.
And
it's
I
okay
think
to say those things.
it is, and getting more comfortable being unsure. It's definitely a learning curve. So yeah, I feel that slow, gradual.
Well, I would love to know how you two met and why you two became so interested in the paranormal.
Our ghosts, well, I mean, our job was haunted.
Truly.
And it was the location of the Charlie Chaplin bungalows on the campus of the school that we used to work for. They have the actual bungalows that were built and lived in by Charlie Chaplin.
Oh, wow.
And people have had some very unexplainable experiences inside those bungalows. And the theater that was built next to the bungalows, people have seen a presence or an apparition or a shadow figure of a man in a suit and bowler hat. And even security guards have claimed that they've seen a figure of a man walking at weird hours throughout the parking lot. And there have been shadow figures even captured of a man in a hat. So it's one of those things, like, are we seeing what we think we want to see? Or is this something that is a combination of what is surrounding where the school is located, which is literally in the heart of Hollywood? So yeah, but Bryce has a better story.
Yeah. So I went to the school and then worked there after I graduated as well. And then Tammy came on to do costumes for the third year program. It's an acting conservatory. And I had been asked to come back to be like guest alumni for a show. And in the show, the character is in his underwear on the scene. So Tammy and I actually met because she was fitting me for like a pair of underwear. Like, all right, I guess we're friends for life now, because like you've seen it all. Like, I don't know. Yeah. And then, you know, it's that, I'm sure you guys can all relate, where it's like you don't lead with like, I believe in ghosts. Like, it kind of is a lot to jump in both feet first. So you kind of start like, oh, I don't know. Like, have you heard about this? Have you heard about this? And what we have found and how we started, you know, our little journey together was like, everyone has a ghost story. Everyone has a story that they cannot explain. And if you just are patient and or prod them a little bit, you will hear things from people that you never expected. I mean, when the head of the school, the head of the department, the heads of the programs are saying like, oh yeah, like I see ghosts all the time. You're like, you're a professional. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But everyone has a story and a journey that they have gone on. And that's sort of how Tammy and I started. It was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I heard that like the costume shop is haunted. Like, what do you think? And then slowly it just built into where we are now.
And so do you guys go on like ghost hunts or investigations as well?
Tammy really does.
Yeah, I've gotten more into the field work. When we started Hollyweird Paranormal Podcast, I wanted to do more than just lip service. I really wanted to go out in the field and meet people and talk to actual professionals or experts or people that were in the same journey as me and Bryce. And I just got immersed with, investigators and historians and even like witches and psychics. And I loved it. I fell in love with it. I had a lot of questions and I had a lot of intrigue, and it led me further into this huge community. And it left me with a lot of questions. So that's what I'm in pursuit of.
I'll never forget the first time somebody said to me, well, I'm in a solo coven. I was like, what? The conversations you find yourself in when you're in like what I thought was a more niche field. And then like you said, everybody's got a story. And if they don't have a story, they go, oh, well, you got to talk to my aunt, or you got to talk to my friend, or, whatever. Well, since you have been kind of more hands-on, have you had any experiences that really stuck out to you?
For me, yes, a lot of things have stuck out. I've seen my first full body apparition at a location at Brackenford Manor in Lake Arrowhead. And it was with another group called OC Ghosts and Legends. And we had been doing an overnight, and within the first hour, we were in this pretty intense room where someone claimed that they saw an apparition of a man like poking fun at her. And after I left the room, I just remember feeling so lightheaded, like all the energy was drained. At one point, I felt like I was ready to faint, but I thought maybe I'm crashing from the double espresso and the Bang energy drink that I had, because it was like literally an 8 to 10 hour lockdown that we were doing in this location.
It's like
it was
300 milligrams of caffeine.
Yeah. But I was game. So we go down to the basement, and it's 10 of us, and I'm sitting in this table. I'm by myself on this table, but there's like probably 5 or 6 people on my far right and 3 people behind me, and maybe 2 individuals that are kind of scattered. And I thought, they're probably just walking around. I'm seeing someone walking in the background of this dark basement. And I'm thinking in my head, it's someone in our group. And I noticed, man, I'm feeling really tired. We're sitting and we're doing an EVP session in this basement of the Brackenford Manor, which was at one point used to bootleg liquor. It was a gangster hangout. It was rumored that Mickey Cohen used to frequent there. So we were in this room where a lot of people have claimed to see these apparitions of shadow men. So I was sitting and I noticed, like, crap, my recorder's acting funny, and I'm feeling really lightheaded, and I'm like in and out of sleep, and because it's cold and it's dark. And I look up and I notice like there's this little like pillar, and I keep on seeing this head poke in and out of this pillar. And I'm thinking someone in the tour, and I look at it and I'm like, why is he looking at me? And I'm just like, kind of like doing the, what? And the thing kind of like jolted back, like, no, you didn't. And I was just like, what are you doing? And so this thing comes to my face, and I could see through it. I could see eyes. I could see an outline of a nose. I could see an outline of a mouth. I could even see outline of its damn like crow's feet. Like it has wrinkles in its face. And I'm just like, I'm processing this. And I'm like, what am I looking at? And I get up. I'm like, who's in my face? And the thing disappeared. And I'm like, who is in my face? I'm having like a Maury Povich moment where I'm like bringing the chair down. I'm like, no. What just happened? And how is it that everybody in this room cannot see it or didn't see it besides me? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm saying to them, I saw something beeline to my face. How come no one saw that? And I'm thinking I'm going crazy. Is it because of the Bang energy drink? And thank God, one of the individuals that was sitting behind me, this EMT guy who before was telling myself and the head of this crew, like, oh, I have like psychic abilities. He was like, Tammy, I saw the same thing. And I'm like, okay, before I go into descriptions, can you tell me what you saw? He's like, whatever it looked like a man behind that pillar, and it was looking at you, and you kind of like you were just like, oh, game on, what's up? And it made a beeline to you. And when you got up is when it disappeared. I'm like, what color was it? He was like, it was like a translucent gold color. I'm like, yes, that's what it looked like. That's exactly what it looked like. I wasn't going crazy, but I'll never forget how it just made a beeline straight to my face. And I'll never forget what it looked like. It was just the oddest thing.
And I'm sure you guys have heard this throughout your journey with your podcast, but isn't it amazing how many ghosts or spirits, when they see somebody who can see them, like they're almost surprised, like, oh, look at this human looking at me and I'm looking at them, like that. I don't know how it all works, but that must be like a real, like, holy shit moment for everybody,
Yeah. And when it happens to you, you're like processing it. It's not like you could grab your camera and take a picture. Like, no, what's happening? This is too good to be true. Like what's really happening? And that's where I really thought it was someone in my group, like a creeper. I was like, why is he looking at me? And yeah, it was just something unexplainable, but it fell along the lines of what people have witnessed in that room. So, and at that point, the more I was investigating that year, the more open I was becoming. Like I was seeing a lot of things and hearing a lot of things too. Yeah.
And do you feel like, since you have been doing the podcast, or do you think there's a correlation between you becoming more open-minded with the supernatural world and you having more experiences? Like, do you think those kind of run together?
I feel like when it comes to the paranormal, it's like a two-way street. Like we have to be more open to the energies that are out there in order to, attempt to make communication to them and to see them. Like we need them just as much as they need us in terms of like how open we can become. Yeah. And
it's like the Santa effect. Like once you stop believing, they just kind of poof and go away,
Exactly. So like I was, putting it out there, like whatever's out there, let me see you, let me talk to you. And sure enough, like it happened.
It's funny you mentioned that because JJ, who I'd mentioned before, he and Kat are engaged and they live together. And for so long, JJ was just like, oh, I want to see a ghost. I've never seen a ghost. He's not like, he can't even like, how when you're driving your car, you can just sense that the person in the car next to you is staring at you, and then you look over and you have that awkward moment of like, oh, that's weird, we're staring at each other. He doesn't have that. Like he doesn't understand how that can happen. Like he doesn't have any of like the energy or anything, which I think he thinks we're all crazy when we talk about that. We had this run of episodes where you could hear this ghostly woman talking in the background of their home. And
oh my gosh.
It all started when we had this 19-year-old medium on named Amanda, and Amanda Ray is her name. And at the end of the podcast, Kat's always real good about asking mediums like, well, have you seen anything during the episode? Have you felt anything?
Wow.
And Amanda goes, well, there's been an old lady standing between both of you wearing like a house robe and smoking a cigarette. And it kind of sounded like she was describing Kat's grandmother who had passed.
I was going to ask. Yeah.
And so we were all just kind of like, you hear so much doing these episodes, you kind of just like get to a point where you're like, oh, okay, that's nice. And then we released the episode and we started getting this flood of DMs saying, after she said that, you can hear what sounds like an old woman talking in the background.
Oh,
and I was
how
like,
interesting.
I edited it and didn't notice it. So like I went back, because they were giving us like the markers of, the timestamps. And sure enough, it was like this voice that was just like, it was really creepy. But as you guys know, you record over Zoom, like you're the first time something like that happens, you're like, I don't know, like whatever. But then we had 2 more episodes where people said, hey, that lady's voice is back. And both times happened when we brought it up to other guests who were asking us about it. Because a lot of times we have fans on to like share their stories and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then we had one episode, and this was like one of the crazier things I've seen with the paranormal, I guess. And this guest was telling us about like their haunted Chester cabinet or drawers or something. I don't know. Anyway, Kat and JJ just stop and stare at each other like while this person's like telling us their story, and I'm like looking at them on the Zoom like, what are they doing? It's so rude. Like, and then they just go like, I'm sorry guys, we just heard that woman's voice out loud. And JJ had the biggest like oh shit face I've ever seen. And I was like, "Are you guys okay?" He was like, "Yeah, I don't like this. Like this isn't fun anymore." So that was like, and you could hear that that time was like really detailed on the mic. And then since then, I don't really hear it in editing. Every now and then we'll get somebody saying like, "Oh, I heard that anomaly here or there." I don't really go check for it as much anymore, just because I don't want it to seem like we're pushing some kind of narrative. Like people hear it, they hear it. If they don't, they don't. But that one time though, where they heard it out loud, it's like, how do you explain that? I don't know. But so yeah, you never really know what's going to happen. And Bryce, you mentioned that you saw a full-bodied apparition as well.
Yeah, this was like quite a while ago. This is when I still lived in Indiana and I was working at a theater, and all theaters are haunted.
I was about to say, what's up with theaters and ghosts?
It's science. I don't know why it's science, but it is. I think we always talk about like energy, right? Like you have to think about, especially in LA, which, we talk about a lot, but like the energy of the land, the energy of the people, the energy of the buildings. LA is so nefarious and notorious at like demolitioning and then like putting things on top of each other, like especially after the pandemic, so many places got like torn down and shut down and repurposed for other things, and like you're putting a band-aid on that history, and so that history kind of starts bubbling up through. So I think that's part of why theaters are haunted, is that actors bring so much of that kind of chaotic energy to the space, and then the space kind of absorbs that.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. We are the conduits that demand for history to be repeated. So
and all actors are crazy. Like, I don't know why we are. It's just the way we are. We can't help it. So
my whole crew is improvisers, so I can definitely.
Oh, that's even y'all are even crazier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was working at a theater. It was notoriously haunted. Mostly a lot of like opening and shutting of doors kind of situations. Lights going off and on, things like that. A lot of times there was like a basement, and then the main theater was like directly above it. And people would hear people walking up around upstairs when no one was there. They would go check, no one's there. Lights would turn on, no one's there. I was there late one night. My roommate at the time, he was the head of the props department. And we heard someone like walking around upstairs, and we were like, I don't know, we should just go check, like, to make sure we lock the doors, because we were the only ones there. We walked up, and there's like a rehearsal space, and then you walk through another hallway, and then there's like the main theater. Mm-hmm. And so he was looking at the rehearsal space. I walked towards the main theater, and the lights were sort of like a push button system. You had to like really push them in. It was like an old theater with like really old technology. So you had to like push the breakers in to get the lights to work. And I heard them all push, and I like looked to the left into the lighting booth, and all of the lights go on, and there's no one in the booth. And I like look, it's like, what is going on? And again, like Tammy's saying, your brain is trying to catch up to what's happening. And I like went into the theater, and it's a theater in the Round, and the director, he had actually just passed away. This was around the holidays. He had passed away like 3 days prior, and the show was set to open that weekend. And, everyone was like trying to get everything in order without the director. And he was standing there on the stage, and he had this blue Chicago hat that he always wore. And he would stand with his like hand on his chin when he was surveying like the set and the props and the actors. And he was posed like that on the stage. And I just said, Roy, you can't be here. And he looked at me, and then as if I blinked. I don't think I blinked, but it was like he was there and then he was not. And I just like turned and like shut the lights off and walked downstairs. I was like, I gotta go home, right? It's like 3 a.m. at this point. My roommate's like, are you okay? I was like, I just gotta go home. Like, I can't be here. I'm really tired. Like, this is ridiculous. But it was just the fact that it was a person that I knew who had just died 72 hours at that point, and who was so instantly recognizable by like his mannerisms and his costume and all of these things. I've had other experiences more recently since then, but that one certainly was like that's a hard one to explain away. Not that I'm looking to explain things away. I also enjoy like the mystery and the excitement, but I always look for like a logical explanation first. We talk about this all the time. Like if the air conditioner is on or off, like if the electricity is on, like these things can affect your experience, and the energy that you bring can affect your experience. But that one was like I don't really know how to explain seeing someone that I personally know is dead.
Yeah. And did you find some comfort in seeing him, or how did that make you feel?
Yeah, I liked knowing that even in death, he was still doing the thing that he would have done in life, which was, working in the theater until the last possible minute. Yeah, I think there was some kind of comfort in that. I think it was shock mostly too. Like, I think I was just like, you cannot be here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it is a comfort to know that like he was still the way I remembered him.
It's just stories where people see the physical apparitions are always so fascinating. I'll share a quick one with you guys. So I have had 2 experiences in my lifetime where I've seen a physical apparition. One took place when I was like maybe 12, where essentially I was waiting to go sleep with my friends in a house that seemed to be haunted. And I thought one of them was running across the room. We played with the lights turned off. Oh, no. And I went to swipe them, and my hand went right through them, and they like turned their head and looked at me, and it kind of looked like a Jawa, like little red reflective eyes staring at me, and we all screamed, went out of the room. So that's a very abridged version of that story. But the most recent one was over Halloween this year. My wife exciting. And I, it was like pretty far apart, which is kind of crazy. But my wife and I went to Vegas for Halloween for the When We Were Young Fest. And it was a lot of fun. And we stayed at Mandalay Bay, which of course had some pretty tragic stuff happen not too long ago, although I don't think it's related to my story. But anyway, we went out that Friday to the Palms. We did we both dressed up like Beetlejuice, which was really fun. She did like a gender bender Beetlejuice. It was an 80s, 90s party. And came back to our hotel. Probably ended up going to sleep around like 1:30 or so. And I'm a light sleeper. I woke up at 3, which is not unusual. I wake up often during the night or whatever. And when I looked over to see what time it was, I actually reached over and turned the clock face down because it was kind of bright. And when I did that, I looked and there was a little boy staring at me, and which kind of hit pretty hard because I have a 2-year-old. He's almost 3 now. So like seeing what looks like to be an 8, 9-year-old just staring at me. And he was dressed in like older garb, like it was not from our time period. And it was very clear that he wasn't alive. He was like kind of a tinge of gray, I would say. Wasn't in like color. And I have night terrors sometimes, or where like I'll not night terrors, but sleep paralysis, where I'll see like a spider drop down. That doesn't really happen anymore. It happens periodically, but almost never happens anymore. So I thought maybe this was a version of that. I was like, okay, I am not seeing a little boy standing next to me in this hotel room. So I closed my eyes and I rolled over, and then it kind of hit me like, I don't really move during sleep paralysis. I can't reach out and touch that clock. I can't roll over. So I said, I'm going to roll back over. Nothing's going to be there. Just going to be one of those freak things that I can't explain. Open my eyes. There he is, just staring at me like I was a fish in a fishbowl. And then I was like, okay, this is kind of freaking me out a little bit. I didn't wake my wife up because she's like a hardcore skeptic. Should have been like, you drank too much tonight or whatever, like just go to sleep. And so I kind of like thrusted back over to the other side. I was just like, what am I gonna do? There's this like ghost kid. Like I was really starting to freak out, and I was like, okay, for real, there's nothing here. Like I'm just losing my mind. I rolled back over and looked one more time, and there was what I assume was his father. There was like an older man behind him with his like hand on his shoulder, and they're both in the same like time period, same like tinge of gray, clearly not alive, and they're both just staring at me. I didn't feel threatened.
Okay.
But they were just staring at me. But to say I didn't feel threatened does not mean I was not freaking out.
Of course not. Like,
but
you have a
could you
family
not?
list
Yeah.
right there.
yeah,
You know?
and so I rolled over and which this is so funny because I've heard people say this like a million times on our podcast and I never understood it, but I rolled over and put the covers over my head and like closed my eyes and fell asleep. And I never understood that, but like that was my closest way to get to safety in like an unreal situation. And there's a friend of the podcast, her name is Catherine. She co-hosts with me a lot. She's a medium. And I don't know if this was necessarily her medium powers, but she was like, you know, that really sounds like to me that they were both from the Mormon period of Las Vegas when they settled Vegas. And the kid specifically, the dad, his imagery is kind of starting to kind of lose out of my memory a little bit. But the kid really looks like a little Mormon kid, like the way he was dressed.
Whoa.
So yeah, that's my recent apparition story. That's
crazy.
Freaks me out. Like for a while after it happened, I would just like close my eyes, like trying to go to sleep, and I would see, like, I don't know. It's like it's troubling. It's cool, I guess, but like you would have thought doing the podcast would have prepared me for that. It did prepare me to keep looking at it, you know, but for people who have never had an experience, it's hard to explain like the mental gymnastics your brain does during those situations. You know, it's
right.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Hey guys, we wanted to introduce you to a new podcast from Travel Channel called Pop Paranormal. If you're a fan of cult horror classics and the paranormal, then this is your podcast.
We are fans of pop horror classics.
It does look good on us.
It does look good on us. We know our brand. Pop Paranormal is a horror movie podcast hosted by Kara Mahorn and Chuck Collins. They're married and are the geekiest couple you know. And each episode they talk about their favorite horror and paranormal movies. They also include recommendations on cult horror classics, how some of these movies have changed the TV and film landscape, and they include some behind-the-scenes tidbits like how bees have been used in some scenes where you may have thought they were fake.
Candyman?
Cough.
Don't say his name 2 more times.
I refuse to be in a mirror in the dark, so we're fine. It's totally fine.
Speaking about cult horror classics, your girl was in the Halloween episode that they released. This was a fun episode. We talked everything about Michael Myers, Jamie Lee Curtis, and of course, fan conspiracy theories.
Yes. Besides the amazing episodes that they produce, the real gem of this podcast is the chemistry of this amazing couple. They truly have their finger on the pulse of pop culture. They've been doing this for a long time. They know where this industry has been. They know where this genre is going, and they are the taste makers. Kara Mahorn, aka the Blurred Girl, is a culture critic parked at the intersection of pop culture and diversity, which is where I get my bus every morning. Go figure. I love that. It's my favorite intersection. And Chuck Collins is a comic book artist, podcaster, and horror connoisseur. Each week, they dissect their favorite horror and paranormal classics with deep cuts and current faves that have a lasting impact on pop culture.
They're a horror match made in nerd heaven.
Yeah, it's my favorite of all the heavens.
Listen to Pop Paranormal on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm ready to watch a horror film. What about you?
I'm ready to get some popcorn.
Have you ever felt like you have capabilities to see?
I have always had very strong like deja vu. I have had premonitions before. I have found myself with the last job I worked for about 10 years where I would be in a situation at work and my brain, which is weird, me and my brain are not two different people, but where my brain would be like, they're going to say this, and it'd be like, pop, 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 pop. And then it'd be like, you're going to say this, pop, 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 pop. I'd have dreams that would, you know, come to fruition, like those kind of things.
Wow.
But those kind of things were like very sporadic. It's not something where I'm like in control of anything or like know when it's going to happen. You know,
it's never in control at times. It just happens. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know, I guess is the best way to put it, but I've had like people who claim to be mediums and stuff to be like, oh yeah, there's more there for you if you ever want it. But I'm like, I'm kind of okay where it is.
Yeah, I've been told that too. That's why I'm like, when I start seeing them more, it's because I've had psychics that are like, yeah, you have it there. Like, it's like a magician doing the tablecloth act where they just pull the tablecloth. He's like, you want to do that slowly, especially since you're just getting into it. But yeah, that's what I'm kind of gathering too from you. It's like you have a very strong clair, and and
I'm very like empathic, and I think almost everybody I've interviewed who feels pretty close to the supernatural is also extremely empathic. So I think there's something to that. You know, I think for whatever reason those two seem to go together hand in hand. But yeah, so that was pretty crazy. I don't know. And it's still so fresh for me, even talking about it. It feels a little strange. Like the one from my childhood, I can ramble that one off and like detail pretty quick, but it's because the story has become the truth in that one because it's from when I was like 12, right? So I don't really, I mean, that's my memory, but who knows how much of it is my memory. The one from like a month ago is like right there. It's plugged right in, you know? So.
Oh yeah.
Pretty crazy stuff. Well, I know you guys like to kind of delve into hauntings on sets of movies, theater, that kind of stuff. And I am in Atlanta, but I have a story from you from one of the most haunted places in Georgia, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Savannah, which I guess we still consider part of Hollywood since they do film things down there from time to time. And it's not a very long or crazy one, but it was a pretty fun one. So I thought I would share it with you guys, and especially like I think y'all can relate to, you know, kind of the indie scene and that kind of stuff. This one has some of that energy, but it had a 91% on the Rotten Tomato audience score, which I thought was pretty cool. So it must be pretty fun. So basically they filmed this movie this year, or released this year, I should say. And I think it came out in October. So this guy, he directed it. He also acted in it. It's called A Savannah Haunting. It's based on a true story. And we're really going to test my throat here, but it's based on a true story about a mother who's struggling with the guilt over the tragic death of her daughter. Her family moves to Savannah from California to escape, like, you know, the memories of the daughter's passing. And once they're in their new home, the mother believes she's being haunted by her daughter who passed away.
Whoa.
So the kind of neat part about this, I thought, the guy who's acting, one of the actors in it, you know, is the director too. They filmed in his childhood home, which he had not been back to in a while because he's a working actor and director. He said the home was so haunted that he would not feel comfortable walking up the stairs in midday unless somebody else was with him, because there was so much paranormal activity in the house.
Yeah.
Which is like pretty crazy that he was like, oh, I got this idea for a horror movie. Let's go film it in my childhood home. That is really haunted. Some of the incidences that took place while they were filming that the cast and crew experienced were like tools just vanishing. They couldn't find. All of a sudden, lights going on and off, and then things reaching out and grabbing the actors.
No.
Which is a big no for me as well. Before filming, he brought in experts to investigate, and they wanted to cleanse the home of any, you know, bad, quote unquote, bad spirits. And they said all these experts said was that there was a multitude of hauntings going on, that it wasn't just one haunting, but there was one specific spirit that was more interested in being malevolent or, you know, vicious towards them. So those people claim that they, I don't know, banished the spirit. I don't really know how that works, but they claim that they got that spirit to leave. And then from there on, the home was still haunted, but it didn't feel haunted in a bad way. They didn't feel like, the actors didn't feel that negative energy. He didn't feel that negative energy. And he said he was no longer scared to walk up the stairs in midday by himself. But I thought it was interesting that he said that like they were all like Daniel Day-Lewis, you know, being very like that it really helped the actors in their process of the movie being in a home that was haunted with things reaching out and grabbing them. I was just like, what? So I have not seen this yet, but I definitely want to at least check it out to see if there's anything that I noticed from hearing so many, and I'm sure you guys will feel the same way, hearing so many ghost stories of real experiences, that if I go, oh yeah, that really looks authentic. Oh yeah, that, because apparently a lot of the hauntings that he put in the movie were based off his own experiences in the home as he grew up there. And then it was kind of a mixture of that and the true, alleged true story that he based the horror movie on. So yeah, it's called A Savannah Haunting, which, I guess, we'll give him a good try for the name of the movie. But
of course, I heard the director on an interview of the Most Haunted City podcast, and
really,
yeah, he did a very awesome interview where he told the host, I grew up in this house. It's always been haunted. I remember coming to LA and being away from Georgia and then coming back and revisiting the house and experiencing all those things again. And then that it inspired him to do his movie. But at the same time, like you said, like while they were trying to shoot the movie, it wasn't just him, but everybody on set they were all having their experiences. And what was so interesting is that it just wasn't a specific time of day. It was just randomly, even during the daytime, nighttime, morning, like something was always happening, which is really, really interesting. And I think one of the psychics that they brought in, or all of them that he would bring in, said the same thing. Like there's some weird vortex going on. And yeah, there's one that's potentially malevolent and there are other energies that come and go as well. But maybe it's also the property of where I think the house was also built to, that could have like catered to a lot of what was going on. So what I loved about that interview and his response to when they asked him, like, what do you think it is? He's like, I don't think we really know what we're truly dealing with at the end of the day. Like we could put labels on it, but I really can't say what it is because we truly do not know. And I love that answer. And I love that answer when people say that, because I think the biggest thing that we have to do in this field is have these types of talks of what is the paranormal. And I've said this to Bryce, like the paranormal is like an octopus or a bird, like it's this creature. And take, for example, an octopus. It's like this, the paranormal is an octopus, and we're too busy studying its tentacles, and we're just too busy watering down the beauty of what we think it is by calling it ghosts, demons, residual haunting, evil or whatnot. And we're losing focus of what is causing that and what it could possibly be.
Yeah. That's a very good point. I got into all of this primarily, one, I wanted to have a fun project to do with some of my improv friends. But I assumed it would last like a month, as most of those projects do. But it kind of became its own thing. But the real reason I wanted to do something like this is because I have a fear of death, and I wanted something to make me less afraid of that. And
talk to death doulas, and I've been talking to hospice nurses. Those are your people that you want to talk to. Yeah. And you'd be surprised with some of the stories that they have. And the more I've been talking to them, the more I'm understanding the process of death and what is expected of us and from us when we're ready to cross over. To be honest, like, I'm personally going through something like a personal grieving process with my mom. And, that's me understanding like her process of deterioration. She has Parkinson's, but I know like when that time comes, like she's going to be happy. Yeah. And that is something that, I've been talking to nurses about. They're like, yeah, you're going to expect this and you're going to go through that. And, it's all going to be fine in the long run because they'll no longer be in pain anymore.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's tough because I firmly believe even if you live 100 years, like life is short. Truly. Like I'm in my mid 30s and man, it just feels like time goes by so fast now. I can't hold on to it. And especially with having a young kid, it's just, I just feel like we jump month to month to month,
Yeah.
you know, and
I can't imagine.
yeah. And that's another, you know,
Aw.
nice thing about the podcast is, yes, I love interviewing people and all that, but when you talk about the supernatural and these bigger topics, it does help kind of keep things in perspective, you know, because a lot of times we are talking about
Absolutely.
history and everything else. Well, we are going to be releasing this episode on both our platforms. So I would love for you guys to kind of share a little bit about your podcast. I would love for you to let our audience know where they can find everything you guys have going on, because your podcast is definitely something they need to check out.
Yeah, so our podcast is called Hollyweird Paranormal Podcast, and it's a true crime and paranormal podcast where we talk about everything and anything that is true crime and paranormal related in and around the Los Angeles area and its greater outside parts. And you can find us on Facebook and on TikTok at Hollyweird Paranormal and on Twitter at HWP Podcast.
Awesome. And you know, Tammy's a real one when I brought up this like very nuanced ghost story about a haunting in Savannah. She's like, oh yeah, I heard all about that.
Really,
I was like, man,
the best.
I was like, I'm so glad I didn't make anything up when I was telling this story.
No.
She would've been like,
No, I love reading. I love listening to podcasts, your podcast. I love it. I love hearing people's experiences. And you'd be surprised, like there's such a similarity and parallel to it.
Yeah, so absolutely. And for your audience who maybe hasn't heard our podcast, I would say we have tried to create this safe space for people to share their stories. And that's something we started hearing as the podcast went on, which has made me feel really good, because I think whether or not, you know, I will never know if some of these stories, quote unquote, took place. But I will say for the vast majority of people who have shared their stories with us, it's their truth. They firmly are sharing what happened to them. And if people are coming wanting to learn more about the supernatural, I think it's a good place to do that. But you also get to hear, you know, three friends that have kind of gone on this journy. You get to hear Kat and JJ get engaged, and then I said they're engaged. They're married now. I should say that too. And it's been great. You know, we've been doing it for 3 years. We're getting closer and closer to that millionth download, which is not something I ever thought we would do. You know, and it's incredible. It's just been great. And one of my favorite things is to try to broaden the supernatural community with like-minded creators that I enjoy, like you guys. And I hope that, you know, we can all stay in touch and collab some more in the future.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
Of course.
I keep hearing about these paranormal cruises and things like that. I'm like, how do we get paid to go on a cruise to talk to our audience?
I know.
Sign me up.
With Strange Escapes. Yeah, they went and did a huge like European one. I think there's one they're doing to Alaska very soon. Yeah. And then I will be doing one in May, not a cruise, but I am going to be venturing with them to Waverly Hill Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let us know when you're doing that. We'll make sure to let our audience know, because that's really awesome that you're going to get to have that experience. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a blast. It's nice to put some faces to the podcast. We really appreciate it. And I would love for you guys to do the outro with us, if you don't mind. It's pretty simple. I'll say my name. Tammy, you'll say your name. Bryce, you'll say your name. And then we all go, woo.
I love it. Love it.
With that, I'm Noah Daniels.
Tammy Merhep Chavez.
I'm Bryce Mitchell-Williams.
Woo.
Oh my God, I love that so much.
I know. We got the woos.